Most modern people would not last even a single day trying to obtain food through hunting. But the Inuit were forced to hunt giant whales without modern equipment, without shortcuts, and without any right to make mistakes. Only pure skill, patience, and immense courage. Their first and most difficult task was to track whales without any modern tools in the harsh Arctic wilderness, where temperatures could drop to -84 degrees Fahrenheit. Inuit hunters faced what seemed like an impossible challenge, finding enormous whales without any technology at all. No radar showed where the whales were swimming beneath the ice. No satellites transmitted coordinates. No engines assisted in the hunt. Only human skill against the most brutal environment on Earth. Sea ice became their map. The hunters were able to notice nearly invisible patterns on the frozen surface. Tiny cracks, barely perceptible changes in color, or differences in texture that indicated where a whale might surface to breathe. An experienced hunter pressed his ear to the ice and listened carefully. The quiet gurgling of water below was sometimes the only clue that a massive bowhead whale was approaching. It was a game of Marco Polo with extremely high stakes, where the loser does not simply get wet, but suffers frostbite. Where the loser does not simply get wet, he suffers frostbite. There is an old Inuit saying, "The ice speaks to those who know how to listen." Every pop, crack, and groan of the ice meant something important. One incorrect judgment could lead hunters many kilometers in the wrong direction, or bring them onto thin ice, where a single step meant falling into freezing water. Whales, despite their enormous size, follow consistent routes in the ocean. Families pass down knowledge of these underwater highways from generation to generation through stories and songs, not through written maps. Elder hunters clearly remembered where successful hunts had taken place many years earlier. These people possessed perhaps the most impressive mental GPS system in the world. They did not need to plot a route again when the ocean was memorized for thousands of kilometers in every direction. The hunt required teamwork that seemed almost magical. Families acted together, sometimes positioning themselves many kilometers apart along the possible paths of whale movement. Without phones or communication devices, they used hand signals, snow markers, and sometimes smoke signals, which could be seen over vast distances even during blinding snowstorms. They also relied heavily on the remarkable abilities of their sled dogs. Their own senses and the temperature itself helped them track whales. Whales created slightly warmer areas in the sea ice, where they surfaced again and again to breathe on the coldest days. These breathing holes released small clouds of vapor, visible only to those who knew where to look. This was nature's version of "you are here." If one looked even more closely, ocean currents told their own stories. Hunters learned to notice the slightest changes in the movement of water beneath the ice. They knew that whales preferred certain underwater zones, deep channels, the edges of ice shelves, or depressions where food accumulated. By drilling test holes and feeling the direction of the currents with their hands, they could predict the appearance of whales several hours before they actually arrived. Most impressive of all was how they tracked whales by sound. Water carries noises and whale movements extremely well, and by using simple hollow tubes pressed against the ice, hunters effectively invented their own underwater microphones. The steady, powerful whistle and the splash of a whale's massive tail could travel many kilometers underwater. Hunters were able to distinguish different species of whales solely by the unique sounds they made while swimming. It was like having front-row seats at nature's own concert, except that the tickets cost far more, sometimes fingers and toes lost to frostbite. All of this knowledge required a lifetime of learning. Young hunters began mastering these skills almost from birth, going out with the elders as soon as they could walk. By the time they led their first hunt, they had accumulated thousands of hours of observation and practice. The tracking skills that helped Inuit families find whales also helped them survive on dangerous ice. But even after locating their giant prey, hunters faced an even greater challenge. Finding a whale was only half the task. Getting close enough to strike required patience, stealth, and perfect timing. A frightened whale could disappear beneath the ice for 40 minutes or more and then surface again many kilometers away. Inuit hunters built kayaks designed for silent movement. Each kayak was made from seal skins stretched over a frame of driftwood or whalebone. The smooth hull glided across the water almost without a sound. These kayaks were true ninjas of the Arctic, completely silent until the moment it was already too late for the whale. Complete silence was maintained until the moment when it was already too late for the whale to react. Hunters wore white cloaks made from polar bear fur or carefully cleaned seal skin to blend in with the ice and snow. Some even covered their faces with white paint made from crushed shells and animal fat. From the perspective of a whale looking up through the water, these hunters became almost invisible against the bright sky. Slow movement was essential. Any splash or sudden motion could warn the whale of danger from hundreds of meters away. Hunters trained to remain completely motionless for hours, even in extreme cold, waiting for the right moment. Timing was critical. Whales followed regular breathing cycles, especially while feeding. The best moment to approach was the final breath before a deep dive, when the whale was focused on filling its lungs rather than searching for threats. Imagine trying to sneak up on someone at the moment they take a deep breath, except that this someone weighs as much as 20 school buses. Weather conditions also had to be perfect. Hunters preferred slightly rough water, which concealed small sounds. Wind direction was of enormous importance. Approaching from the downwind side prevented the whale from detecting human scent. One incorrect gust of wind could undo hours of careful preparation. Concealing human scent was critically important. Some hunters rubbed their bodies and tools with whale fat preserved from previous hunts. Others chewed certain Arctic plants and spat them into the water, creating smells that aroused curiosity in whales rather than fear. Maintaining silence reached extreme levels during the final approach. Hunters used only hand signals and eye contact. The handles of paddles were wrapped in soft seal fur to muffle the sound of wood against the edge of the kayak. They controlled their breathing, slowly exhaling underwater when they were very close. Team coordination had to be flawless. Each hunter had a specific role. Some waited along possible escape routes, while others carried out the main approach in open water. Hunters traced wide circles around feeding whales, gradually tightening them. Along the edges of the ice, They used the solid ice sheet as a wall, guiding the whale toward the waiting hunters. The Inuit learned to read whale signals. A raised tail often meant that a deep dive was about to follow. Rapid breathing indicated that the whale was becoming alert. Appearing bubbles and strange patterns on the surface could mean that the whale had sensed something was wrong. It was like studying a secret language, where a mistake in translation meant no food for an entire month. When hunters came close enough to strike, the most dangerous part of the hunt began. The moment of truth arrived. After long tracking and closing in on the whale, hunters faced the greatest test: to strike a creature weighing up to 100,000 pounds using only thrown weapons. No firearms, no explosives. Only muscle strength, skill, and carefully designed tools. The task was made even more difficult by the incredible toughness of whale skin. The outer layer of a bowhead whale's skin, in some areas, reached up to 1.5 feet thick, roughly like a car tire. Now imagine that this tire is alive, enraged, and the size of a school bus. Welcome to whale hunting. The Inuit harpoon was a true engineering masterpiece. Unlike ordinary fishing spears, traditional whaling harpoons had detachable tips. The main shaft was usually made from driftwood and often exceeded 6 feet in length. At the working end was a pivoting tip made from bone or ivory. This tip was designed to penetrate the whale's body and then rotate beneath the skin, making it nearly impossible to remove. In essence, it was the deadliest version of those irritating plastic tags on new clothing that cannot be taken off. A line made of seal or walrus hide was attached to each harpoon tip. These were not just ropes, they were true works of art, taking months to create. First, the hide was cut in a spiral into one continuous strip. Then stretched, dried, and carefully chewed to make it soft and flexible. The finished line could stretch to a length of more than 50 feet and was strong enough to withstand the surges of an enraged whale. The throwing technique required incredible strength and precision. The hunter had exactly one chance to do everything right. The ideal target was the area just behind the blowhole, where vital organs lay closer to the surface. Missing this point could mean a wounded whale that would escape, or, even worse, an enraged animal that would turn to attack. Several floating bags made from seal skin, called avaks, were attached to the harpoon line. They acted as floating brakes, making it harder for the whale to dive deeply after being struck. Some hunting groups used up to 12 of these floats, gradually adding more to exhaust the whale. After the first strike, the hunt entered its most dangerous phase. A wounded whale could swim many kilometers, dragging boats behind it. Hunters had to manage the line with extreme care, letting it run freely when the whale pulled suddenly, and then closing the distance again when it grew tired. Too much tension could snap the line or capsize a kayak. The first strike rarely killed the whale immediately. Hunters needed to get close enough to deliver additional blows to vital areas. This often meant hours of pursuit of the wounded animal, sometimes in dangerous open waters. It was a primitive marathon, only instead of a medal at the finish, the reward was a 6-month supply of food. Teamwork was vital. While some hunters managed the lines and floats, others prepared to deliver the killing blow with special spears. These weapons had longer shafts and sharp tips designed for deep penetration into vital organs. The most dangerous moment came at the very end. A dying whale could thrash violently, overturning boats or pinning hunters between its massive body and ice floes. Many hunters bore scars, silent witnesses to dangerous encounters, proving how deadly risky this ancient tradition was. When the giant sea creature was finally subdued, another challenge awaited the hunters, no less difficult. With the hunt completed, a race against time began. A dead whale floating in Arctic waters created new difficulties, sometimes even more serious than the hunt itself. The first colossal task was to move this enormous mass from the water onto the ice. Large whales could not simply be pulled out whole. They had to be butchered while they were still in the water. Hunters secured the whale's body at the edge of an ice floe, cutting holes in the ice to pass ropes around the carcass. In essence, it was the coldest and most difficult attempt at parallel parking ever undertaken. Speed was critical. At temperatures dropping to 84 degrees Fahrenheit, the whale's carcass began to freeze solid within just a few hours. Hunters used special curved knives called ulu to cut through thick layers of blubber and meat. These crescent-shaped blades allowed for fast and efficient movements, conserving precious energy in the harshest cold. Working in shifts was mandatory. No one could cut in the icy air for more than 20 minutes without risking severe frostbite. Teams rotated constantly. Some worked, while others warmed their hands. Despite all precautions, frost-damaged fingers were common among experienced hunters. These people invented the system of "I urgently need a break" long before office workers, with the only difference being that their excuse sounded like "my fingers are starting to turn black." Long before office workers with the only difference being that their excuse sounded like "my fingers are turning black." The butchering of the carcass followed strict patterns, passed down from generation to generation. First, long strips of blubber about 2 feet wide were removed. These blankets of fat were hauled onto the ice using bone hooks and ropes. Next came the meat, which was cut into pieces convenient for transport, suitable for carrying on sleds. Controlling the blood became a serious problem. The smell of fresh whale blood could attract every polar bear within many kilometers. During butchering, lookouts were always posted, carefully scanning the horizon for approaching predators. The cold itself became both an enemy and an ally. It threatened the hunters with frostbite, but at the same time preserved the meat. Moreover, pieces that lay on the ice for too long had to be thawed before cutting could continue. Sometimes, hunters used the warmth of their own bodies hiding small tools under their clothing so they would remain warm enough to work. Women played a key role in the later stages of butchering. They arrived with sleds to transport the meat back to the settlement and often performed more delicate work, dividing large portions into family-sized shares. Their knowledge of food preservation was just as important as the hunting skills that had secured the whale. Nothing went to waste. Even snow soaked with blood was collected into containers. This mixture froze and turned into a special delicacy that was eaten like an ice pop. In essence, it was the first snow cone business. Although fortunately this flavor never became popular at modern fairs. Tools required constant maintenance during butchering. Extreme cold made metal brittle and bone or ivory prone to cracking if used incorrectly. Hunters carried spare cutting edges and continuously resharpened blades during the work. A dull knife meant wasted energy, a luxury no one could afford in such a harsh environment. As the butchering neared completion, the entire community gathered, forming sled caravans to transport the harvest home. The meat and fat from one medium-sized whale could feed a community of 40 people for up to 6 months, making all this hard and dangerous work truly worthwhile. When the final pieces were loaded onto the sleds, and when the blood-stained ice began to disappear beneath fresh snowfall, the community prepared for a completely different challenge, one that tested their ingenuity no less than the hunt had tested their courage. Upon returning to the settlement, the real magic began. Every single part of the whale found a use, creating a striking example of a zero-waste way of life that would easily put modern recycling systems to shame. Let us begin with the most obvious, the meat. Whale meat became the foundation of the diet, providing people with protein in an environment where plants were a rarity. Different parts of the carcass were used in different ways. Meat from the back was often cut into thin strips and dried on racks, turning it into jerky that could be stored for months. In essence, it was an early version of meat jerky, only without the need to stand in line at a gas station to buy it. The tongue was considered a special delicacy, reserved for community elders or distributed during celebrations. A single bowhead whale tongue could weigh up to 2,000 pounds, roughly the size of a small car, and contained enough meat to feed dozens of people for several days. Muktuk skin with the attached layer of blubber became a vital food source because it contained extremely high levels of vitamin C, preventing scurvy in places where fresh fruit was unavailable. This whale superfood provided 10 times more vitamin C than the same amount of oranges. Nature's original multivitamin, although its taste would certainly have made children cry, the blubber was rendered into oil through a careful melting process. This oil was used to fuel lamps made of soapstone called kulik, which provided both light and heat in homes during the dark winter months. A single whale could produce enough oil to heat and light the homes of several families for an entire year. Whalebone baleen, the bristly plates hanging from the upper jaw that filter food, became one of the most versatile materials. Long, flexible, and incredibly strong, it was used to make fishing lines, nets, and snares. When heated and bent, it could be shaped into sled runners that glided smoothly over the ice. Nothing demonstrated Inuit ingenuity better than the use of whale bones. Massive jaw bones became the load-bearing framework of dwellings for the construction of homes. Ribs were used as sled runners and roof supports, shoulder blades were turned into snow shovels, and smaller bones became everything from sewing needles to harpoon tips. In essence, these people operated a prehistoric Home Depot, where everything was made from a single but very large fish. Intestines, once cleaned and dried, became waterproof material for clothing and windows. When tightly stretched and sewn, dried intestine turned into semi-transparent glass that allowed light into dwellings while keeping out the icy air. Even the parts that might seem unappealing to us had value. Brain tissue was used to preserve and soften hides, and the liver, rich in vitamins A and D, was especially prized during the dark winter months, when sunlight, and therefore the natural production of vitamin D, was almost non-existent. Some whale products became important trade items. Communities that achieved a successful hunt could exchange whale materials for resources from inland regions, such as wood or certain types of stone. This trading network extended hundreds of kilometers, connecting coastal and inland groups. All of these remarkable resources did more than simply sustain life. They formed the center of a rich cultural tradition, binding people together in ways that went far beyond mere survival. After the exhausting work of hunting and butchering a whale, one might think that everyone would want to sleep for an entire week. But instead, a successful hunt became the reason for one of the most important social events in Inuit culture. A celebration that brought entire communities together and strengthened the bonds that helped them survive in the harsh Arctic environment. The feast began almost immediately. The hunting team received special portions first, especially muktuk fresh whale skin with the attached layer of blubber. This was not just a reward for dangerous work. Muktuk provided an immediate replenishment of energy after days of intense physical exertion. In essence, it was the first post-workout protein snack in history, although it would likely not be popular in modern gyms. News of the successful hunt spread quickly to neighboring settlements. In some regions, messengers were sent to villages up to 50 miles away, inviting them to join the celebration. These messengers carried small pieces of muktuk as proof of the hunt's success, an edible invitation that no one refused. It was the first RSVP system in which the only possible answer was yes, unless, of course, you preferred to starve. The distribution of whale meat followed strict traditional rules. The hunter who delivered the first successful strike received certain prize portions, including parts of the flipper. But no one, even the most skilled hunter, kept everything for himself. Instead, the main portion of the whale was distributed among all members of the community according to ancient customs. Ancient customs of shared distribution. These systems of sharing were so important that in some regions they were even given special names, such as Nik, which specifically meant the fair distribution of whale meat. The celebration began to the sound of drums made from stretched walrus stomachs or seal skin. Their distinctive, resonant rhythm carried throughout the village, announcing to everyone that the feast was beginning. This was an early system for announcing celebrations without social media invitations or Facebook events. The air filled with special songs dedicated to the spirit of the whale. Many of these songs were performed only during whale festivals, making them rare and especially valued cultural moments. Some hunting groups believed that whales could hear these songs, even over great distances in the ocean, and therefore were more willing to give themselves to hunters who showed proper respect through music and dance. In essence, it was a thank you letter to the whale. Only instead of a handwritten card, gratitude was expressed with the whole body through song and movement. The place for the celebration was usually carefully prepared. In winter, large snow houses could be built specifically for the feast, and in the warmer months, open gathering areas were created. Using whale bones from previous hunts as natural seating. The largest vertebrae served as stools, and jawbones formed impressive arches marking the entrance to the celebration area. The dances told the story of the hunt. The movements imitated tracking, approach, the strike, and the whale's final submission. Small children watched closely, absorbing both hunting techniques and cultural values through these performances. Unlike many modern celebrations where children may become bored at adult events, Inuit whale dances engaged people of all ages because they contained practical knowledge vital for survival. Stories flowed as freely as the food. Elders recalled successful hunts from decades past, and the current hunting team shared details of their recent adventure. These were not just entertaining tales. They contained vital information about where whales could be found, how they behaved under certain weather conditions, and which hunting methods worked and which did not. This was the original version of online reviews, only instead of a 1-star rating for a restaurant, a mistake could mean that your village would starve the following winter. During these celebrations, special clothing also appeared. Lead dancers wore elaborate dance headdresses decorated with beads or carved ivory elements. In some communities, there were special mittens made from seal intestines, worn only for dancing at whale festivals. These items were often passed down from generation to generation, accumulating stories and spiritual significance with each use. Festive games tested the skills necessary for hunting. Some of the games were trials of strength, such as arm wrestling or lifting weights using whale bones. Others focused on sharpness of mind and memory, challenging participants to recall details from the stories they had heard or to identify specific parts of whale anatomy. These were the original game nights. Only instead of charades or twister, participants might compete to see who could name more internal organs of a bowhead whale. The celebration did not end when the food was gone. Its effects were felt in the life of the community for many months. Successful hunts were recorded in songs, carvings, and drawings, preserving their memory for future generations. New tools made from the recently harvested whale were displayed with pride, and plans for the next hunting season gradually began to take shape. And perhaps most importantly, the celebration reinforced something essential for survival in the Arctic. No one survives alone. The hunt required teamwork, and the sharing of the harvest reminded everyone that their lives were tightly intertwined in a harsh environment, where a single mistake could cost a life. These social bonds were not merely a pleasant addition, they were necessary for survival. When the celebration ended and daily life returned to its familiar rhythm, the community carried with it not only full stomachs and new supplies, but also a renewed sense of connection to one another and to the natural cycle that had sustained their ancestors for countless generations.